In planning this conference, we gave a great deal of thought as to a good way to wrap it up. And we felt like that you guys this week have received all kind of technical information, all kind of strategies for how to help our children and adults. And we thought, you know, these folks in our families, in our community, they're really unique, they're really interesting, and the bottom line is a lot of them are really funny, creative folks. So we thought it'd be a good way to send you off back to your homes would be with a smile on your face and hope in your heart. So we asked Mr. Wayne Gilpin to be our last keynote. Wayne is the father of Alex, a 15-year-old son with autism, and he realized that a sense of humor is helpful in every situation, especially with our autistic children. And Mr. Gilpin has compiled 2 books called Laughing and Loving with Autism and More Laughing and Loving with Autism. He's the past president of the Autism Society of America and was co-chair of the 1993 International Conference on Autism. Mr. Gilpin is president of Future Education, Inc., which publishes several books on autism. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Wayne Gilpin.
I've decided instead to make this a very serious day. Those folks from Wisconsin, they're a real trip. First of all, good morning. We can do a little better than that. Good morning.
Good morning.
I have to tell you that I'm in great envy of you folks that are sitting out there, because I know what's coming, and I wish I were there to watch what's going to come up. Ruth Sullivan and I were having dinner last year sometime. During the course of that dinner, she said, you know, if we had to have a child that had a handicap, what could be more fascinating and interesting than autism? I never thought about it from that posture, but she's absolutely right. No parent that I know of with an IQ higher than 4 has ever said, gee, I want my child to have autism. None of us asked for it, but once it's here, as parents, we didn't run away from it. We faced that challenge, sometimes with a tear, very often with a laugh. Professionals, on the other hand, we have, and this is something you've never been told before, we admire and genuinely appreciate the work that you all do. Excuse me, would all the people who are purely professionals in the audience put your hand in the air? Okay. We as parents recognize and appreciate very much the work that you all do. And this is something you've never heard before. When we're alone, we wonder about you guys. Because we didn't have any choice, but you guys had a choice. When my son Alex was born, he brought with him a lot of joy, a lot of love, and also a challenge. At the time of that challenge, his mother and I heard all the dire thoughts you could possibly hear. You've all heard them from some of the people that are professionals that are not in this room. You know, the interesting thing is that those people that are in the field of special education, some other fields, the people that we want to talk to are never here. And so we heard all those dire thoughts and wondered what the future was going to bring. Today, Alex is, oh, never mind, I'll cover that later. Children and adults with autism bring and see a different world. That seeing of a different world is what inspired me, if that's the right term, to begin writing a book about humor. When I began writing the book, it was all going to be about Alex. And then as I was the president of the Autism Society, or maybe the treasurer at that time, and I traveled around the country meeting parents and meeting teachers, they had stories that were just as good, if not better, than the stories that I had. So it really changed from being about Alex to being about all kids, and about stories from children from all over the United States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, England, Germany, etc. In the course of writing that book, I really learned a lot about those parents that I was talking to. I learned a lot about myself. And by the way, that's another joy that Alex has really brought to me, is that Alex taught me the joy of unqualified love, that I didn't necessarily have to give back everything that I expected from everybody else. In the course of writing that book, one of the best stories in that first book was written by my daughter, who wrote about what she thought Alex would be like in this dream if he did not have autism. Those of you that have read the book, you need to go back and read that section again. My daughter will be up on the stage in a couple seconds as my aide. She's being paid an awful lot of money to be here today. Children with autism see the world differently than we normals do. We see it hampered, veiled by what we think things are supposed to be. We're veiled by what society tells us we should do. They don't have those governors at all. They see it exactly the way that it is, many times much more honestly than do we. Alex is reasonably mainstream. He has a lot of homework, and he works at it probably twice as hard as the other kids in his class. And I help him whenever I can. I have 3 fast stories about Alex and his homework, and me. These tell a lot about how I think rather than Alex. I'm a fan of the Civil War. So when Alex came to the section of the Civil War, I dove into it. I just loved it. And I'm reading this section to him. We came to the word abolitionist, and we went through that. Got to the end of the chapter, and it was the time for the review. And I said, Alex, there was a group of people who wanted to abolish slavery. He looked puzzled, and I said, now hear me again, son. They really cared, and they fought to abolish slavery. Who were they? He said, oh yeah, slaves. I said, you know what? Your answer is much better than the answer in this book. But when you come to that question, use the other answers. We were talking about the First World War. And in one of the major battles, Battle of Marne, I believe, there were 150,000 casualties in a period of 2 days. And I asked, Alex had read it, and I said, Alex, how many casualties were there? He said 150,000. I said, that's right. And then I thought a second, I said, Alex, what is a casualty? He thought a second, and he said, it's when all the soldiers stand around and they look casual. I had this great image of all these soldiers going. They'd have been a whole lot safer that way, now that you think about it. Alex, in his class in science, one of the things he had to do was get a package, and within that package put an aid, and then insulate that package And the idea was they would drop it and see if the egg broke. So Alex and I worked on it, and sure enough, Alex's egg was one of those that did not break. Those that did not break went to the next level, and they dropped it off the school building. Again, Alex's egg did not break, along with 3 or 4 others. As I got the box back, I noticed there was this name on the side. I said, Alex, what's that? And he said, well, they all had to name their eggs. I said, oh, okay. What did the other kids name them? He said, well, names like egg drop. I said, that's what, I'm sorry, it was called egg drop soup. And another one said egg and I. Another one had egg foo young. Alex named his egg Frank. So Frank the egg will live forever. Alex and I were working again in the area of science. And again, many times we think that we're understood clearly, and they take us exactly as our words are offered. And let me know when you're ready. Okay. In the course of studying, he had to write a report on someone famous, and we chose Madame Curie. And we went through the whole thing, and I said, you know, Alex, sadly, and I mentioned earlier that she had been dealing with a lot of radioactivity. And I said, you know, Alex, sadly, she died, and she was killed by leukemia. So we went on, got to the end, and I was making Alex write out answers. So I said, Alex, I want you to tell me what happened to make her die, Madame Curie. And this was the answer that Alex wrote. After I got off the floor, I explained there was no guy that shot Madame Curie. But he heard me say leukemia. So. Recently, I met a lady, and I'm sorry I've lost her card. Is her friend here the one that gave me the wonderful drawings? Are you here? I don't see her. I'm going to have to do the best I can with her name. She had a child at the age of 3 was echoalic, as by the way Alex was. Are you over there? Jane Warren, and her son's name is Andy? Okay, thank you. And Jane decided at the age of 3 that she was going to work with her child as hard as she could, and she did. And one of the things she decided to do was every day to set aside a certain amount of time to be silly with her son and to do things that were funny. And she did. Every day, set aside time just to be silly and do things, make faces, jump around, put on clown masks, whatever it was, to be helping him. I'm not going to tell you that humor is going to cure everything, but I am going to tell you that this kid at the age of 3 that the doctors had written off and was echoalic, at the age of 8, he drew these wonderful drawings, and they asked him to draw the way he saw emotions. And this is the first one. Jennifer? Next. Good. Isn't that great? 8 years old. We're going to be selling these later in case I want to. This is really neat. But this is my favorite. You're going to love this one. Which one? Turn off and move it over. Children that have autism not only see the world much more honestly than we do, they often see it much more spontaneously, and at times that just shock us as to where the idea came from. The current president, as of 2 days, of the Autism Society of America is named Sandy Kanaki. Sandy is a teacher. And one of the students in her class that she's worked with is named Jeffrey. Of all the stories I've gotten, Jeffrey is one of my favorite. I never met Jeffrey, but Jeffrey's one of my favorite kids. He doesn't show a lot of emotion and doesn't, grab on to people in what we call an absolutely normal way. One day, Sandy's walking down. Sandy, are you here? There you go. She's all the way in the back. Walking down the hall, Jeffrey walks up alongside of her and tenderly takes her hand and starts walking down the hall with her. This is a great moment. And she says, Jeffrey, it's so nice of you to be doing this. He looked up at her and he said, I sure hope that my penis is okay. Sandy's a trip. I mean, it took courage to be telling that in these days of like sexual abuse charges and stuff. One might wonder what was really going on. I sent out the letter to everyone, almost everyone here, saying if you had a funny story to come and we try to work into the stage. I had probably 20 people send me letters, of whom I chose roughly 8, and I also had about 100 of you come up to me while here at the conference and say, I meant to send you the letter, wanted to do it, I got a great story, ran around. But we have 8 marvelous people who have been practicing at the Greensboro Comedy Club all this week to give this presentation. And they're all folks who are members of the Autism Society of America. They're your peers. They're our friends. And they have some funny stories to be sharing with you. The first speaker is Julie Donnelly. Julie?
Thank you. My son John Paul allows me to tell stories on him. When he was very young, he didn't seem to feel his bodily sensations. For instance, he was burned badly, and he didn't cry or show any pain from it. And another time, we lived in northern Minnesota, and he walked outside in his bare feet when it was 30 below zero and showed no reaction to the cold. So he didn't seem to feel things very much. And this got better as he got a little older. But when he was 6 years old, he started losing his teeth. Well, most 6-year-olds, they'll be wiggling it, and they'll be pulling it out, and they'll be thinking about putting it under the pillow for the tooth fairy or something. But he was just unconscious of the whole process. And one morning at breakfast, he was sitting there, and one of his teeth fell out and landed on his pancake. Well, John Paul didn't even notice it and continued eating. And then he looked down, and he saw this tooth on his pancake. And he looked up, and he looked at his brother and his sisters, and he said, "Who put their tooth on my pancake?"
I'm not sure if he's in the room. Gary Mezaboff. Gary, you here? Yeah. All right, thank you, Alex. Thank you, Gary, too, for putting your hand up. Alex began working with Teach and the wonderful people over there, and the really great work they've done for so many kids. You could go on for hours about it. Alex was there for his, I think it was his first week he was there, and one of the first things they did was to go swimming. Most kids with autism love the water, and Alex is no exception. And so Alex jumps in the pool. And as he jumps into the pool, I don't know if it was Gary or one of the gentlemen working with him said, look out, you've got your watch on. Whereupon Alex looked up and said, oh, it's okay, it's my dad's watch. That was fun. Our next speaker is Miss Lee Murray. Lee?
Hello. I'd like to share with you a story that my son has shared with us. My son is Alexander. He's 6-year-old. And one evening, my husband just returned from work, 12-hour day. I at home full-time with 2 children with autism. I was really happy to have an adult come home to talk to. And we got talking, and Alexander is always ready for the next activity. And he knew that when Dad gets home, he gets to go to 7-Eleven. And he gets to get a Slurpee or whatever treat. So he was very anxious to go and do this, and his father and I just kept talking, and he came and he'd interfere with our conversation physically and remind us, and we just kept reminding him, okay, just a minute, just a minute. And finally, Alexander said, I need to go to 7-Eleven now. The future of the free world hangs in the balance.
One of the stories that was told to me recently, and I'm sorry I don't remember the lady's name, was she has a son who was reaching puberty, and she decided it was time for him to start using deodorant. And so she handed him the deodorant, and she said, now, here it is, and I want you to put it on, and I'll be back in a few minutes. She came back in and found his forearms caked with deodorant. And she said, what are you doing? And he said, that's the way they do it on television, Mom. And he's exactly right. They do it on television. Our next speaker is Miss Lisa Lieberman. Lisa?
Good morning. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to honor my son, and one of his many gifts to me is the funny things that he does. And I also want to mention that I have a wonderful husband who has a physical disability which really prevented him from being here because of the weather, the heat. And otherwise he probably would be telling this story. But one of the things he does do with our son is help coach him through dressing, helping him get dressed in the morning by talking him through it. He's 7 years old. And he was putting on his underpants, and like many of you, he has a problem with knowing what goes in the front and what goes in the back, so he had them on backwards. And so my husband said, Jordan, you need to take off your underpants and spin them around. Now, the next story, I have to harass Wayne about this one because he was so worried about me talking about it. It has to do with waste matter in the toilet, and after telling that penis story, I can't believe you were worried about that, Wayne. Now, how many of us have not worried about trying to get our children's poop directly in the toilet without taking indirect routes? I was doing my morning constitutional and sitting, of course, and my son walked in the bathroom. I saw the door push open, and I thought to myself, well, I'll deal with this later, but this is a teaching moment. And so I said, Jordan, would you like to see what Mom just did in the toilet? To which he very excitedly walked over, he peeked in, and his hands went up, and he said, I am so proud of you, Mom. Mom went poop in the toilet. Wait, there's more. Then he ran up the stairs to announce to my husband how proud he was of Mommy because she went poop in the toilet, and went in the pantry and unwrapped a piece of sugarless candy and handed it to me.
Most of the stories that we are telling here today are not in either of my books. That one never will be. No. No, I'm kidding. That's a great story. This one is, but it really tells about our children so well that it really bears repeating. This woman had a problem that her son had a real fascination with throwing things out of the car window. The window would roll down and pew, things would go out. And so she finally figured out one day that he really liked rules. And she said to him, he was about 7 or so, when she finally got this thought across. And she said, there's a law against littering. You cannot litter. I could go to jail if you do that. Nothing for a year. No mention of it, and he stopped. They went on this trip, pulled into a rest stop. She was tired and when she heard the back window go down, at first it didn't bother her. Then out of the corner of her eye, she saw pew, 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 things flying out. And she turned to him and he said, what are you doing? He said, Mom, it's okay, it's okay. Look there at the sign. The sign said, fine for littering. Yeah, you really have to think that kid had held back that whole year, and he was so happy. He finally found some state where they said it was okay to do it. One of the really wonderful things about having been active in the Autism Society of America is that I've met and really come to care deeply about so many wonderful people and admire them. One of those that I have found a great fondness for and a lot of admiration is our next speaker, Ruth Sullivan. Ruth?
This one is in his book, Loving and Laughing. It was a beautiful Sunday morning. We were at our parish church, which was the Campus Christian Center at Marshall University. It was Confirmation Day, and the bishop was resplendent in his red robes, and Joseph was very happy to come, and we were sitting fairly near the front because he wanted to see everything. It was a very joyous occasion. Many families in happy anticipation of their little one being confirmed into the church. After the ceremony, the bishop processed down the aisle and then stood at the back of the church to greet people as they were coming out. Since we had sat at the first of the church, the ones at the end of the church got out first. It was a large crowd. So they were inching and slowly talking to the bishop and saying happy things. And I could see that Josie was getting more and more anxious to meet the bishop because you could see he was getting a little bit antsy. Finally, he got close to the bishop, about 3 people deep from the bishop, and he reached out his long teenage arm and took the bishop's hand and said, "French toast." Now, what the bishop didn't know was that that was the very happiest words in Joseph's language at that time. My second story is about Joseph when he was about 5. We knew he had perfect pitch, and I had begun to discover why he was always pinging things with his strong little middle finger. He would ping the pots and the pans and the silver and the mirror and anything that happened in his environment. He would ping just to listen to the sound. I have never seen a more hyperactive child. Any child I've ever seen. He's the most hyperactive of any autistic child I have ever seen. Wiry, sleeping only a few hours a night, wild, hanging on the chandeliers. So on Saturdays, my husband would relieve me by taking Joseph out. This time he decided to take him to the mall. It was a small mall. And Joseph is kind of wild, running like a little dog on a leash, although he wasn't on a leash. And he saw this very large, bosomy woman who was wearing a very large metal pendant. And he went up to her and he pinged the pendant. and he said under his breath, "C sharp." I was telling this story many years ago at a board meeting, and in the back of the room was Doris Haar, who has recently died, but she was an HEW official who had come to our board meeting. And as I told that story, she's one of the most humorous people I've ever met, but as I told the story, she says, "Aren't you glad he didn't say B flat?"
I hadn't heard that. That's great. We are in case you haven't noticed, we're in the South. Alex had an opportunity to be visiting a friend in the fine state of Virginia that had a very time-honored picture that was taken of one of the great heroes of the South, Robert E. Lee. They were very, very proud of this picture. Very stately, with his beard and his white hair. Didn't have his hat on, just had that. And the owner of that picture was very proud, as I mentioned, and he made the huge error of exposing his great vanity about this picture, or great pride in this picture, by saying to Alex, "Do you know who this is?" Alex looked at it and looked at it again, and I said, "Come on, Alex, you know who that is." Alex said, "Oh, yeah, Scrooge McDuck." Our next fine speaker, Miss Tammy Grabowski. Tammy?
I have a son, Matthew, who has given me a lot. And one of the things is laughter. We have been trying very hard to teach him all of his self-help skills. And one of them is to put on your socks. And of course, you get rid of all the jargon. You say, put on socks. And Mommy had had a very trying morning, and she was trying to get out the door. And Matthew would not put on socks. And I insisted that he put on socks. And he said, "No, no, no." And of course, I gave him no sympathy whatsoever. I just did not have the attitude for it that morning. And I said, "Put on socks," and prompted him. He's still crying, and he's pulling on his socks. No, no. And finally, I got socks on, and I left the room. Matthew pulls off socks. "No, no, no," and brings them out. "No, no, put on socks." And I'm thinking, something's wrong. Something's definitely wrong. And I'm thinking, well, maybe there's something inside the socks. He holds them up, and points to them and says, "My socks are broken," and sure enough, there was a hole in his sock. The second story is about exasperation on Matthew's behalf. He switched into a very intensive classroom schedule this year and goes to school 5 mornings a week and then has special education 1 afternoon a week. And they do push him very, very consistently. And he was just exasperated. He had been demanded a lot to do that particular Thursday. And he showed up, and we raced from one school, and we eat at McDonald's, and then we race to the next school and kind of drop him. And he's expected to keep performing on this level, and he just had it. And Judy had put him in the corner and tried anything, and he was just not going to do it today. And finally he said, "Oh, Miss Judy, Hakuna Matata." And my final story is about being able to make choices. Just recently, by surprise, we found out that we're going to have another child. And I was debating on how am I going to tell my 7-year-old and my 5-year-old autistic child this. And I thought about it and thought, well, we'll just tell them. We'll see what reaction we get. So our 7-year-old is gifted. And I said, well, he's going to have a lot of questions for me. I'm going to brace myself. And the only thing that came back was, well, Jeffrey, do you think it should be a boy or a girl? And he said, oh, Mom, we need more boys. I think it should be 2 boys. And I thought, oh, no, please. Well, we told Matthew, and his face just lit up. I said, what do you think it should be? And he said, oh, a baby dinosaur.
I have 2 teacher stories about teachers that are not in this room, for sure. These are both true, by the way. Both these teachers were told that the child that they were working with had autism. One was fairly high functioning. And at the end of the day, she was exasperated with his actions, and she made him write down 50 times, "I will not fidget." That's sad. The other one put the boy out of the room because he was doing Rain Man imitations. Not all the stories in my book, or the people are telling, or not all the humor is tied to kids that are high functioning. One of my favorites is about the woman who took her son at the time, like in his teens, who was nonverbal, to one of these parks that has animals, and you can touch the animals, and et cetera. And there was this one where you could ride a camel. And as she was getting ready, they said, we're not quite ready yet. We're having a problem in the pen. And on the other side, there was this older camel that they were probing and jabbing, et cetera. And the thing would not get up. And so finally they said, we're going to go ahead and give him his ride because he was getting anxious. And we'll deal with that later. And they were still over there probing and driving. And this young man tended to make guttural sounds. And as he was riding around the camel, they came near the camel that was seated down, that they tried for hours to get up. And as he went by, the boy was going, oh, oh, oh. The camel's ears picked up, and he stood up straight. She was telling me she was so glad she had finally found a great career for her son. Where a job coach was going to come from, she wasn't sure. Our next speaker, again, is one of my favorites, Sue Marino. Sue?
Hi, everybody. Just like all the other parents, I tell my stories about my daughter, Beth, only with the greatest respect and love. She's given me some of my biggest tears and some of my greatest joys. So I just want to preface it with that. The first story, and I'm going to, sometimes we have to be real honest, so if I'm a little honest here, I hope you all bear with me. When she was younger, Beth had a lot of screaming behaviors, and some days were pretty bad, and when we had a 12-hour screaming day, we didn't go out. I was born and raised in a very small town called Ogden Dunes, Indiana, and it's just as small and boring as it sounds. And the family all lived kind of in a row along this road, and we would go out with Beth to see my parents. And if Beth was having a really good day, we would go and see Great Aunt Edith. Great Aunt Edith was the matriarch of our family, the head of 5 corporations, a devout Methodist. No offense to Methodists, and I say this with love and respect for Aunt Edith. She had never said a swear word in her life. She had never had a drink of alcohol nor a cigarette. It's amazing that she didn't disown me many years ago. But we were always on our very best behavior when we went there. So Bethy was having a great day, and she had this cute little blue dress on with the little petticoats. And Beth was such a pretty little girl, and just 5 years old, and she had her curly hair. And I said, oh, honey, this is a good day. Let's go down and see Great Aunt Edith. So we went down, and it was not only Great Aunt Edith, but that day we had the triumvirate, Great Aunt Edith, Great Aunt Bess, Great Aunt Hazel. All wonderful and very refined women. And we got there, and we got into the living room, and Great Aunt Edith, whenever Bethy was doing well, which is about the only time that she saw her, would say, and we parents with higher functioning kids get this, I told you there's nothing wrong with that child. So we'd done that, and Bethy was standing there, and kind of a lull came, and all of a sudden Bethy said, where's the goddamn bathroom? And I now know what it means to sincerely pray, God, swallow me up into the earth. And I grabbed her hand and I said, oh, gosh darn it, Beth, gosh darn it, I think that gosh darn bathroom was right down the hall, gosh darn it, let's go right now. And of course, they all pretended like they hadn't heard it, and I'm sure that they didn't think it came from my husband, who has never uttered a swear word in his life, so guess who got that little dunce cap? I'm sure she heard it on TV. The other one was, as she got older, that wasn't so cute anymore, right? And she was in college, and Beth went to a very small Catholic school in Indiana, college. And my husband was Catholic, and I'm Presbyterian. And while she was raised Presbyterian, and while she was in college, she decided to convert to Catholicism. It was a beautiful thing for her. So she's in this nice Catholic college with mostly other nice Catholic kids who were just as wild as any other kids, but they knew how to behave when their parents were there, right? You know, whoever writes the paycheck gets a lot of respect, and by the time you get to college, you figure out that at least to their face, they're going to get the respect, or you're not going to get the paycheck. Well, Bethy hadn't made the connection yet. So she'd get mad at me, and her favorite word for me at that time was, well, the B word that, refers to a female dog. For those of you from other countries who might not know, that means bitch. And I had said, listen, Beth, the thing we're working on this year, because we still work on things together now. And I said, I am your mother, and you keep saying you want to be like everybody else at this school. The other people do not swear at their parents like that. Not to their faces, maybe behind their backs. You cannot do that to me anymore. If you do it, I really mean this. I won't sign the next semester's tuition check. You have really humiliated me with this too many times. And so she said, all right, I won't. And I said, I mean it, Beth. You have to give this 100%. You've got to stop. So one day she was on the phone with me, and she was really, really mad. And she said, you. And I said, watch it. You remember what I said. It's almost time for that check. And she said, you heathen.
The humor keeps coming at us. This happened this morning at breakfast. Alex will occasionally stim, usually in a fairly benign way. And we were having breakfast and looked over at Alex. He was rocking. I looked over at him in my most patronizing way, and I said, are we stimming? He said, no, just me. Many times, as I told you earlier, the great humor is in how foolish we are. And I know Mike will not mind me saying that his story shows us just how foolish we can be. Mr. Mike Lesbury. Mike?
For any of you who are wondering, yes, I am the male on the panel. During the holiday season of 1980, I met and fell in love with a woman named Deanna, who's an educator in autism. And during the next few months, Deanna enlightened my world of autism, something that I really had no knowledge or understanding of. And during the course of this time, she piqued my interest about this group of children that she worked with and periodically invited me to join her class and find out more about these beautiful children and the whole area of autism. However, my inherent caution sort of delayed my response to this invitation. But in a beautiful spring in Atlanta, my fancies had turned not only to love, but it turned also to more interest in autism and into these beautiful children that she talked about. So we arranged my visit to the classroom. I left my office, Mr. Mike Cool in his three-piece business outfit, and I was going to visit this autistic class. When I arrived, I was struck by the classroom and its organization in pods and the efficiency that things were developing. And so my confidence was even increased. I did look around and noticed a little girl named Holly, and Deanna had cautioned me about Holly. Holly had a reputation of having an enormous skill to move as quickly, perhaps more quickly than the sound of light. But she also had the skill to grab one's hair and hold it tight, tighter, and tightest. Now, obviously, my risk in that regard was pretty minimal. So when Deanna introduced me to her students and asked me to join circle time, I felt confident. I sat down, I joined circle time, and the music and the ensemble began. They gave me a set of sandpaper blocks, and I began playing with the kids, feeling pretty confident. And more quickly than any one of us could ever say, Holly reached up with her rhythm sticks and wrapped me right across the page. For those of you who want to take a close look, I still carry the scar. It drew blood. It was with me for 3 or 4 weeks. And I think Holly had spoken, and she had enlightened me. Mr. Cool, I didn't invite you to the circle. And I think deep down, she knew that perhaps I was taking a little part of her teacher away. Thank you.
One of the ladies I was talking to recently here brought her son. Many of you came to the conference in Las Vegas. And the doctor she's working with is one of the more erudite folks in the Autism Society, B.J. Freeman. And the child went with her. And as things happened, they got to go out at night. And in front of one of the hotels was a imitation Elvis singing songs and doing things. This kid thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. Loved music and just watched this guy. About sometime after that, they were talking, she was speaking, as I understand the story, to someone else, and she said, you know, it would be great if he didn't have autism. And he immediately said, no, 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 no. If I don't have autism, I can't go to Las Vegas, I can't see Elvis, and I can't see B.J. Freeman. Our last speaker is Stephanie Neal. Stephanie?
Merry Christmas, Mrs. Tiedemann. That's what Harrison was supposed to say when we saw his physical therapist. We had practiced a lot, and he had learned to say, Merry Christmas, Mrs. Tiedemann, while handing her a present. I was confident he would be able to handle this, The day of physical therapy arrived. I dressed him up in this cute little Christmas outfit. He walked into physical therapy carrying the Christmas present under one arm, jumped up into the chair. He looked through the sliding glass windows, and I noticed that Mrs. Tiedemann was sitting quietly doing some paperwork at her desk. All of a sudden, Harrison grabbed the window, slammed it up loudly against the side, threw the Christmas present in, barely missing Mrs. Tiedemann, and said, "Here," in a very harsh tone. Looking at Harrison, I said, "What are you supposed to say?" He said, "Mrs. Tiedemann, you're supposed to say thank you." It dawned on me that he thought that I was correcting Mrs. Tiedemann. Then I was worried. Did she think I was correcting her? I said, "No, Harrison, you're supposed to say, 'Merry Christmas, Mrs. Tiedemann,' and hand her her present." Harrison said, "Merry Christmas, Mrs. Tiedemann. Mrs. Tiedemann, you're supposed to say thank you." I said, "Harrison, give Miss Tiedemann a chance." I looked at poor Miss Tiedemann. She reminded me of a deer caught in the headlights of a car. She was pitiful. She was terrified. She didn't know what to say, when to say it, what to do, what not to do. Listen to this repetitious conversation, wishing she had not been the focus of our Christmas cheer. Harrison said, "Open your prize." I said, "Harrison, this is not a prize, it is a present." Harrison said, "It's a prize, she was good." I said, "Well, there was no arguing that point. She was good." However, he had missed the point, the fact that we were giving her a present because it was Christmas time. Sometimes these conversations in the round make me crazy. I have since learned not to argue with a person who has autism. Recently, my husband and I went to TCBY's, which our son with autism loves to go and have frozen yogurt. Sometimes we assume that he just knows things from just living and being in the world. And sometimes we try really hard to think ahead of time what he might think about or might wrongly think about something. So this particular day we thought, well, he really hates to get his hands sticky from the ice cream. And that really upsets him because he doesn't like to be messy. So we'll get him a cup of yogurt. And my husband and I should have gotten a cup of yogurt, but no, we got a cone of yogurt. So we ate our yogurt and our cone of yogurt, and he must have thought, well, they're eating their yogurt and what it came in, so maybe I should. My husband looked back there, and his little styrofoam cup had a little bite out of the side, and he said, "Harrison, did you bite that off?" And he said, "I don't want to talk about it." And he said, "Did you swallow that styrofoam?" And he said, "I don't want to talk about it." And he still has not talked about it, and we still don't know what happened to that styrofoam.
I told you earlier of Alex at the age of 2 and 3 and 4. He was echoalic to a large degree. We heard, again, all those dire things. Now, Alex is 16 and anxious. No. Alex is now 16 and is just going into senior high school. Last year, Alex was in the school course, his own choice. Nobody probed him to do it. got up on the stage with all the other kids, did all the dances, did all the moves. He's one of the more popular kids in the school. Sidebar is that recently, I'll skip the sidebar, Alex has developed one of the more frightening senses of humor in the Western civilization. Puns are his favorite way of speaking. I was driving him to the airport to be spending the summer with his mother up in Chapel Hill, and we passed this street. I'll tell you the other one first, maybe we'll catch this one. He said that one of his favorite stories was about this animal named Lucy the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh, Lucy the Pooh. They get really harder, guys. If you live in the South, you know that there's this food chain called Winn-Dixie. Everybody know those guys? Okay. Alex refers to him as Lou's Yankee. I drove. After this one, we were driving to the airport again to drop him off, put him on the plane to send him to North Carolina for the summer. And I, honest to God, drove a half a mile before I figured this one out. We were passing Trinity Boulevard. Alex looked up and said, that should be Trinity Heiferovard. The really frightening thing about Alex is that he's reached the point in his life where he likes it better when you groan than if you laugh. I want to show you, not really as a very proud dad, honestly, but to show you the report card of the young man that at the age of 5, a teacher, a special ed supervisor, reached across the table and patted me on the arm and said, "Mr. Gilpin, you're pushing your son too hard. The sooner you relax and not have him try to do things he can't do, the better off you and he are going to both be." I'm proud to tell you that my self-restraint is such that woman still lives today. But I want to show you the report card of the kid that they said wouldn't learn to read and write, and walking was going to be difficult, and all those stories. This is a report card at the end of the ninth grade. 88, 99, 92, 98, 83, and 100. And I'll tell you that he worked hard for that. And now, I'm going to go to the other mic. I'd like to introduce you to and have you meet my son, Alex. Alex, come up, friend. How are you?
Fine. How are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to hear it.
Are you nervous?
No, I'm not nervous. I'm okay. Alex, what is it that we're going to be doing up here today? I mean, what is it that you're going to be doing?
I'm going to sing a song.
You're gonna sing it by yourself, or you're going to lead everybody?
I'm going to lead everybody.
Okay. What movie is that song from?
It's a movie called Carousel.
Okay. Surely you're not going to lead us in a song like that, are you?
I am, and don't call me Shirley.
That's his favorite joke. He loves it. All right, Alex, what's the name of that song?
You'll Never Walk Alone.
Okay. And?
Please join me. Please stand and join me.
Also, I was the co-chairman of the 1993 conference, and I can tell you that the work that the steering committee from North Carolina put into this is incredible, and they deserve a lot of thanks. And if they're here, David Horn and the others, if you'd like to come up on stage and join us, members of the steering committee. Thank you, Alex. All right, if everybody's ready, the words are up there. I'm sitting next to the one guy in the room that really knows the words perfectly, so I'm going to be all right. There you go. Come on up, guys. Closer. Everybody sing at the count of 3. All right, Yes.
When you walk through a storm, hold your head up high, and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm is a golden sky and the sweet silver song of our Lord. Walk on through the wind, walk on through the rain, though your dreams be tossed and blown. Walk on with hope in your heart, and you'll never walk alone. You'll never walk alone.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate your coming.